is absent from the courtroom. The defendant is present in court with counsel. Anything the record for the state? Anything the record for the defendant?
No, Your Honor.
You may invite the jury in, please. Judge for the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's interesting that Mr. Thomas told you that Joanna Madonna was scratching and clawing and trying to get away from Jose Perez. There is no evidence of that. This defendant talks and talks and talks, and out comes falsehood, deception, distortion, and fabrication. She stood before you and put her hand on the Bible, and she swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. And then she sat in that chair and testified, waved her rosary in your faces, and every time her lips moved, another monstrous lie came out. She told you that all she wanted on June 15th, 2013 was a divorce. And her attorney told you that all the things that the state brought up, all the letters, all her past, those things were irrelevant. But they aren't irrelevant. They tell you her state of mind. They tell you how her mind works. She tells you where she's going. She wants things both ways, but you can't have it both ways. Only one way is the truth. She told you she was so weak and disabled by fibromyalgia that she was in bed every day before dark. But she also tells you that she does Pilates, yoga, walks, swims, shops for furniture and cars, makes jewelry, volunteers at the ASPCA, fosters dogs, rehearses with her band and plays with them in bars at night, that she cleans house for other people, she works for a lawyer, she plans out-of-town trips, she flies to Puerto Rico, she goes to AA meetings, she throws parties. She can't have it both ways. Her daughter told you that her mother did all those things, that she was always very active, and David Whitcomb told you that Joanna Madonna could kick Jose's ass if he tried anything because she was pretty strong. She wants to have it both ways, but she can't. She told you she paid the rent for a year up front and she paid for the cars in full because she didn't want any monthly bills. And then she turned around and told you that she and Jose fought about car payments. Either the cars were paid for or they weren't. She can't have it both ways. She claims she's uncomfortable and stressed when men are around her because of those rapes that she told you happened. Yet she meets John Lopez the day he gets out of rehab, 3 weeks after the last reported or supposed unreported rape, and she jumps right into bed with him and marries him. She obviously has at least one, if not more, other relationships with men after she boots John out because she has 2 pregnancies that she terminates. She walks into a diner in upstate New York, makes eye contact with Chuck Pritchard, who she'd never seen before, and jumps into bed with him and marries him. And after she cleans out his bank account with her $300 to $400 a month overdrafts and he cuts off her cash cow, she dumps him with no warning. And days later, Jose moves in. While married to Jose, the defendant stares longingly into a camera while dreaming that she's staring at Paul, as she tells Paul in her letter. They plan a trip to New York together. And while stringing Jose and Paul along, she's hopped into bed with Chad, who she has, according to her story, only been seeing socially for 6 days. Where's the stress? Where's the fear of men that she told you about? She can't have it both ways. Only one of them is the truth. Why should Jose have trusted her? She can't keep her knees together or her mouth shut.
Objection, Your Honor. Oh, go on.
How could she think you could possibly believe any of the evil fairy tale that she has told you? She's told you that she loved Jose and still does, and then treats him with such contempt that she calls him Fidel to her friends. She tells everybody that he's impotent, that his equipment doesn't work, that sex with him sucks. She posts on Facebook that he's drinking when, even by her own admission in court, she never asked either of her daughters or their boyfriends if the liquor bottles she supposedly found were theirs. And Jose denied it. And Dr. Falgi never saw Jose impaired. Dr. Zinn never saw impaired. David Whitcomb never saw impaired. His daughter never saw impaired. And even the defendant's own daughter, Rachel, never saw him impaired. She testified in court one day that she found condom wrappers, and the next day that she meant, oh no, not condom wrappers, some kind of libido-enhancing packages, because she figured out overnight that her condom wrapper story doesn't match up with Jose being impotent. She trashed Jose publicly before she killed him, and she's still doing it to try to save her own skin. When she married him, either she loved him or touching him made her skin crawl. She can't have it both ways. She told you she knew Jose was cheating because she smelled sex on him 10 to 20 times. And then she also told you that Jose controlled her by threatening to commit suicide every time she told him to leave. Either he was cheating on her or he was overly devoted to her. She can't have it both ways. She told you it wasn't her business to out Jose at AA for supposedly drinking, and then she posted on Facebook. She can't have it both ways. She told you she got sober in 1992, and even when in the hospital for surgery, she wouldn't take any painkillers. And then there was that Champ VA printout for her June 2013 hydrocodone. She can't have it both ways. She told you she married Jose out of love, because he was sweet, because she'd have you think she's good and kind and generous, but he makes her skin crawl. So Jose was her new meal ticket. And even if she knew by then that he wasn't dying of cancer, he surely did have some very bad health problems. He had bad diabetes, he had heart problems, he had lung problems, and he should die soon. She figured she could deal with that because she'd end up with the house, the VA benefits, the Social Security benefits, the farm in Puerto Rico, the trust fund in Florida she thought existed, and everything else he might have. She told you she has no financial woes. She doesn't need anything from Jose or his benefits, but she has no money. She squandered what it took her father a lifetime of hard work to accumulate. If she had money, why was she going to get food from the food pantry? She can't have it both ways. And as time went by, she discovered that there was no farm in Puerto Rico. There was no trust fund in Florida. She'd gone through Jose's large lump sum settlement from the VA, so there was now no cash, and now there was Chad. By 2013, when she does a bunch of searches on the va.gov and socialsecurity.gov for veterans' family survivor benefits, and discovered that she isn't entitled to benefits because she hasn't been married to Jose for 10 years, Jose is just dead weight to her because she isn't going to wait out this impediment to her new soul adventure. To her, all Jose was at that point was a sick, frail old man who had no money and who wouldn't die. The defendant's story sounds plausible if you just accept what she says without questioning the sense of it. But if you think critically about it, it makes no sense. She has piled fabrication on falsehood, on misrepresentation, on top of deception. It is a myth, and it is not worthy of belief. A fiction in which she has tried to extricate herself from first-degree murder, and what she has done instead is given you a perfect self-portrait of a predator. She has tried to pluck the strings of your sympathy, but if you listen to what she told you, all you'll hear is discord. Just think about a few of the things she's told you about herself. She's been an alcoholic, cocaine addict who saw nothing unethical about teaching young kids in that condition. She took $500,000 from her father's lifetime of hard work, and she spent it all. She claims to be a devout Christian who puts on, in her words, a facade of normalcy to get away with things like drinking and drugging and having abortions and divorces, and who tells people now she is forgiven, she is healed. Whether she drank or she drugged or divorced isn't what's important about this. What is important is that she was dishonest. She was dishonest then, and she's been dishonest now. She claimed 3 rapes that she never reported, including one of which that made absolutely no sense, the one on the Bronx Parkway. She said she didn't know the man, that he came up behind her, grabbed her around the neck, raped her on the side of the road, and fled, and then he shows up at her work a few days later with free concert tickets. If he didn't know her, how did he know where she worked? If it was a brutal stranger rape on the side of the highway, do you believe he'd show up back with free concert tickets and expect her to be happy? Think about what she told you about her relationship with her mother. It only got to be good once her mom had a serious stroke and the defendant was in control. She wants to be a victim in her marriage to Jose, but she told you she saw all kinds of red flags, lies that devastated her before she married him. Touching him before she married him made her skin crawl, but she still married him. The lies that she could not abide were so offensive to her that she made Jose go to therapy, but she still married him. She had no attraction to him, but she took him into her bed. Do you honestly think this defendant married Jose out of love or even sympathy, or, as she admitted in one of the letters that she wrote, for the VA benefits? She told you that she and Jose had joint bank accounts, and then she told you she didn't know where the money went, nor did she control Jose's money. She told you it got deposited in their joint bank account. She told you that he earned it as a veteran, that he deserved it. Either she had access to it or she didn't. She can't have it both ways. She mentioned in passing during direct examination that her credit wasn't good, but skipped over any details about that while she trashed Jose and his inability to manage money. And on cross-examination, she's forced to admit that her credit was horrendous, that she came into the marriage with a $46,000 loan on which she had defaulted. Deception again. If you listen to her version of her visit to South Carolina, you never heard her mention the phony story about the B&Es on both sides of the house and across the street that she told to William and Billy and Michelle. And on cross-examination, knowing that she's been busted on those lies because those people got up on the stand and told you that she'd said that, now she blames the phony story that she fed to them on Jose. She is exactly what her own witness, Dr. Zinn, said she is. She is manipulative, she is deceptive, she is aggressive, and she is volatile. She wants you to believe that she had no plan to kill, that she didn't think about it ahead of time, if only for a few minutes or a few seconds. That while she stabbed Jose, that she was in a blackout frenzy and that she slaughtered him because of his vicious attack on her. She knows exactly what she did before. She knows exactly what she did after she killed Jose, and her blackout frenzy is just another falsehood. She wants you to believe that on June 15, 2013, she, 5 foot 10 inches tall and 170 pounds, 20 years younger than Jose, physically fit from Pilates and yoga and swimming and walking, having the shoulders of a rower, as she was proud to tell Paul, armed herself with a taser, a gun, and a knife that she had driven 8 hours to acquire, to tell Jose, who is frail, unbalanced, lung, heart, leg, foot, and hand and arm impaired, and she wants a divorce, that she wants a divorce. She wants you to believe that this passive, humble, non-confrontational, conflict-averse pleaser of a man who, according to her story, had already shot himself in the face and arm, maybe not, she's changed her mind a little bit there, and was bleeding profusely from his face from a gaping wound. She wants you to believe it was reasonable and necessary for her to kill him to save her life. So let's talk some law. The defendant is charged with first-degree murder of Jose Perez, and she is claiming that she is not guilty of that charge or any other by reason of self-defense. And the judge is going to instruct you about first-degree murder and the two lesser forms of homicide, second-degree and voluntary manslaughter, and he's required by law to do that. It's the contention of the state of North Carolina that she is guilty of first-degree murder and nothing less, and we'll discuss that. The judge will tell you that there are 6 elements, 6 things that the state has to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt for you to find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. And the state tells you that, or the judge will tell you first, the first element is that the defendant intentionally and with malice killed Jose Perez with a deadly weapon. And the judge is going to tell you that malice means not only ill will and spite as it is ordinarily understood in your everyday lives, but it also means that state of mind or condition of mind which prompts a person to intentionally take the life of another or to intentionally inflict serious bodily injury that results in the death of another without just cause. The judge will further tell you that if you believe this defendant killed Jose Perez with a deadly weapon or inflicted wounds on him that caused his death, you may infer that the killing was unlawful and with malice. But you're not compelled to do so. You can consider that, however, along with all the other facts and circumstances in determining whether this killing was unlawful and done with malice. The judge will tell you that a knife is a deadly weapon. Think about what the defendant told you on the witness stand, and there is no doubt that she killed Jose with malice. She told you that Jose, already seriously wounded in the face, was unarmed when she picked up the knife in her left hand and stabbed him. She was angry at his lies. She was angry that he had no trust fund. He had no $1 million farm in Puerto Rico. She was angry that the sex was bad. She was angry that he was old and unsteady. She was angry that she had made a bad deal and had to wake up every morning, turn over and look at this man who made her skin crawl. And she was angry that he had the nerve not to die when she had a younger man in the wings. And her story about fighting and Jose shooting and all of that blah, blah, blah over a day and a half of her testimony is a bunch of junk. It doesn't fit the evidence you have heard. It doesn't match the physical evidence. What does match is this. For at least several months, this defendant had been looking into the benefits she thought she was entitled to by virtue of her marriage to Jose with the VA and with Social Security. She was so desperate to get all that stuff started that she contacted the media for help, until she discovered that separating or divorcing Jose would cut her off. She had not been married for 10 years, and she was looking at being cut off. No insurance for Isabel, no school money for her 2 older daughters, no survivor benefit for her, and she had quit her job. So she started looking online for other ways to handle this problem that she had. Guns for under $200, tasers, whether tasers kill people with bad hearts. And if you believe that that was a class project, I've got some land in Florida I want to sell you. Death in absentia, remarriage without divorce. Do you have to report a separation? She started publicly trashing Jose's character so her friends would have sympathy. She tried to trash him in AA by her Facebook posting that an old-timer was drinking. She accused him to her friends of an affair with a woman in Florida. She had set the stage for him to disappear. She even went for therapy to help her be strong enough to divorce. This woman has had practice. She's had 2 divorces already. She knows it's not all that tough. She knows about forms online. How much help did she need? Apparently not a lot, because her therapy turned into another romance. On June 15, 2013, this defendant took advantage of her dying nephew to further her plan to kill Jose. She told a phony story about being afraid because of break-ins next door and readily accepted the free gun that he offered her and got a bonus knife to go with it. And as soon as she had her instruments of death, she returned home, got Jose into the car, and used them on Jose. She took him for a ride to a dead-end road with no houses for at least 200 yards, surrounded by woods. She may have tried to use the taser to stun Jose so she could finish him off with no problems, and either she tried to use it and it didn't work, or she went straight for the gun that she had brought from South Carolina. She thought she could kill Jose, who she'd strapped into his seat, but she was hyped up on adrenaline, and she didn't know how to use a gun well, and she missed. Baby Jose saw it coming and put up his left hand to shove her arm out of the way, and instead of killing Jose, she grazed him in the back of the neck, just like the ME said it happened. Now she had to finish him off. He had forgiven her a lot over the last 4 years, but he wasn't going to forgive her for trying to kill him. So she got out the knife that she had brought back from South Carolina, and she slashed Jose in the neck and in the face and in the chest while he sat there strapped in to that Jeep with his seatbelt that he couldn't unlatch by himself, and he was a sitting duck. She thought she'd mortally wounded him, so she released his seatbelt, got him out of the car to dump his body in the woods, but he went down, face down in the ditch, badly wounded, but still breathing. And she picked up his shoes and tossed him in the woods before she threw the knife into the woods. She made sure that Jose would not come back to the house. She took the knife and jammed it into his back 5 more times just to be sure. That's malice. The second element of first-degree murder that the state must prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt is that the defendant's act is a proximate cause of Jose's death. An approximate cause, the judge is going to tell you, is a real cause, one without which Jose would not have died, a cause that a reasonably careful and prudent person could foresee would cause the death of someone else. And the medical examiner told you that the cause of Jose Perez's death was multiple stab wounds that caused him to bleed to death. He may have had a lot of health issues, but the defendant's knife is what did him in. The third element is that the defendant intended to kill the victim, and the judge will tell you that intent is a mental attitude seldom provable by direct evidence. It must ordinarily be proven by the circumstances from which it may be inferred. The nature of the assault, the manner in which the assault was made, the conduct of the parties, and any other relevant circumstances. He'll also tell you there are 2 kinds of evidence from which you can decide what the facts are. Circumstantial evidence and direct evidence. And he'll tell you that direct evidence is the testimony of someone who asserts actual knowledge of a fact, such as an eyewitness. The circumstantial evidence is a proof of a chain or group of facts and circumstances indicating the guilt or the innocence of a defendant. The law makes no distinction between the weight to be given to either direct or circumstantial evidence. Nor is a greater degree of certainty required for circumstantial evidence than direct evidence. And as the judge will tell you, you should weigh all of the evidence in this case. The defendant admitted to intentionally picking up that knife and stabbing and stabbing and slashing Jose. She stabbed him in the face, the chest, the arm, and the back. She slashed both sides of his neck. She cut him so bad on one side that she sliced through one of the strongest bones in his body, his jawbone, and cut his tongue and broke his dentures. Any reasonable person would anticipate that stabbing and slashing a person in the neck, the face, and the chest would cause their death. The fourth element is that the defendant acted with premeditation. That is, the defendant formed the intent to kill Jose over some period of time, however short, before the defendant acted. It is the state's contention that you have a lot of evidence to show that she thought about this long before she ever did it, but that's not required by the law. However short, some period of time, however short, before she killed him. That's all that's required. It could be seconds, it could be minutes. You've seen the internet searches, and they show how her plan was being hatched. You heard about the trip to South Carolina to get a gun. Do you think it was a coincidence that she told people that she was going to ask Jose to leave that evening? Or does it fit with being armed and having the courage and the plan and having set the scene for Jose to vanish? Even if you're not convinced that she planned well in advance to kill Jose, surely by her own story, as she told it, she did plan. She slaughtered an unarmed man. Premeditation is sort of like deciding to walk. You think that you don't think about it, but you do. Walking doesn't happen automatically. You have to send a message to your brain to walk. And then your brain has to send a message to your nerves and your muscles to lift a foot, move it forward, put it down. Lift the other foot, put it forward, move it down, put it down. You don't think about it for long, but you do have to think about it. If you don't, it doesn't happen. Just like picking up a knife and stabbing someone. The fifth element is that the defendant acted with deliberation, which means, in a legal term, that she was in a cool state of mind. And that's a little confusing because, as the judge will tell you, that doesn't mean that there had to be a total absence of passion or emotion. He'll tell you that if the intent to kill was formed with a fixed purpose, not under the influence of some suddenly aroused violent passion, it's immaterial that the defendant was in a state of passion or was excited when the intent was carried into effect. This defendant, from all her actions, had a fixed purpose when she shot at, grazed, and then stabbed Jose. Again, the judge will tell you that neither premeditation nor deliberation are susceptible of direct proof. They may be proven from the circumstances from which they may be inferred, such as a lack of provocation by Jose, the conduct of the defendant before, during, and after the killing, the ill will of the defendant toward Jose, the brutal or vicious circumstances of the killing, the manner in which the killing was done. This defendant acted with deliberation. You can, in retrospect, follow her mind's workings from December 2012 until June 15th, 2013, and it's like watching a movie and you just want to say, "Look out, Jose. It's coming." And last, the state has to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant did not act in self-defense, or that she was the aggressor in provoking the conflict with intent to kill or inflict serious bodily injury on Jose Perez. And this is tough because there were only 2 witnesses to what happened in the Jeep that night 2 summers ago, and this defendant silenced one of them. So you have to decide this, and in fact most of this case, based on the circumstances that you've heard in this case, in the evidence. The defendant's only entitled to the benefit of self-defense under our law if she first honestly believed it was necessary to kill Jose Perez in order to save herself from death or great bodily harm. And secondly, that the circumstances as they appeared to the defendant at the time were sufficient to create such a belief in the mind of a person of ordinary firmness. The judge will tell you that in determining the reasonableness of the defendant's belief, you must consider the circumstances as you find them to have existed from the evidence, including the size, age, and strength of the defendant as compared to Jose, the fierceness of the assault, if any, upon the defendant, whether Jose had a weapon in his possession, and the reputation, if any, of Jose for danger and violence. Jose, by all accounts that you heard, according to the evidence that you have heard, was kind, generous, humble, passive, and conflict averse. The defendant is not entitled to the benefit of self-defense if she is the aggressor with intent to kill or inflict serious bodily injury. She doesn't have the right to use excessive force. She's only permitted such force as is necessary to prevent her own serious injury or death. She wants you to believe she stabbed Jose to protect herself and her daughter, but all she had to do was push Jose sideways and he would have gone down. There was no way on earth that man in the June heat with his health problems would have made it on foot the several miles that it was back to their house. His legs were good for 10 minutes. His heart, his chronic bronchitis would have gotten him before he even got to Highway 98. And he couldn't even run away from the defendant when his life depended on it. It was not necessary nor reasonable for this defendant to brutally slash and stab Jose to death, and that's the bottom line of self-defense: necessity and reasonableness. In looking at the evidence to determine what the reality of the situation was, I suggest you start with one critical, central fact that you know to be true, and then consider all the other facts and circumstances of this case that you've heard from different people's testimony, and determine what makes sense and what does not make sense when considered along with that fact that you know to be true. And I suggest you take as your starting point Jose's body. It is a constant to hold up to the defendant's many conflicting claims and statements. Jose's body was found face down in the ditch shortly after sunrise on June 16, 2013. He had 5 stab wounds in his back, stab wounds to his chest, his arm, his hands, his face, and shoulder. His neck had been slashed on both sides with such force his jawbone was cleanly sliced in two. He'd been shot in the back of the neck. He had no identification on him of any sort. His carotid artery had been slashed, his heart punctured, his lung punctured, his brachial vein severed. The defendant's word is the only direct evidence that you have of what happened that night, so you have to consider all of the circumstantial evidence, and all of the circumstantial evidence points to first-degree murder. I'm sure you've all heard the story of Robinson Crusoe. He's the fellow who was shipwrecked on a tropical island, and he was lonely because he was there by himself. And though he searched and searched all over that island, he was not able to find another single human being, not another soul. He was in despair for lack of companionship when one day, as he walked down the beach, he rejoiced. He hadn't seen another person, but he knew beyond a doubt that he was no longer alone. Because when he looked down at the sand, he saw the footprints of another man. That is circumstantial evidence. And you know that he saw his man Friday. The footprints in the sand of this case lead to first-degree murder. If you start with Jose's body, the first question you should ask about the defendant's story is, why was Jose stabbed multiple times in the back? And if this was self-defense, why was Jose shot in the back of the neck? And if the defendant so feared death at Jose's hands, why did she, in her story, tell you that she ran towards him when he had been pointing a gun at her and shooting at her? Why not run away or get in the Jeep and drive away? Jose couldn't run after her. And if her story were true that she feared death at Jose's hands but decided to wrestle the gun away from him now to save him, and that he got accidentally shot in the face, why is she still going with shot in the face when the medical examiner clearly told you that the gaping wound was not a gunshot wound, but a sharp force wound because it was clean and it didn't shatter his bone? That it was, to a medical certainty, a knife wound. But the defendant has stuck to that story just like she stuck to her story about Florida. If the defendant had just had a gun shot at her by this man she clearly despises, why would she then take him to the hospital? If her story is that she tried to take him to the hospital before he was stabbed, why not after, when he was clearly no longer a threat? And if this defendant did not have a guilty mind, why has she told so many people so many lies? And that's just the beginning. You listen to everything she said. You think about it critically. You compare it to other evidence you know to be true using your reason and your common sense. As to element one, that the defendant killed Jose intentionally and with malice, I'd like to tell you something that a criminal law professor once related to me. He was talking about intent to kill and said that if you shoot at someone once, you might be able to say there was no intent to kill. But if you shot at someone 4 times, you wanted that person D-E-A-D. The defendant didn't kill Jose with a gun. She used a knife. But she surely wanted him dead 4 times over. And she admitted her intent, and she admitted she knew Jose's limitations, and that is intent, and that overkill is malice. And this defendant thought about what she intended to do beforehand. She thought about it just like you have to think about and decide to walk. You have to decide to stab. And each decision she made was a premeditation. Each time she picked up a weapon, each time she raised her arm and jammed a knife into Jose's bone and artery and vein and lung and heart, each time she did each one of those things, each individual separate act, she had to think about it. And her brain had to send the order to her nerves and her muscles. She had to choose what to do, and she chose to stab and stab and stab. Even if she didn't plan months ahead of time, she thought about what she was going to do, and then she did it. She surely wasn't calm when she stabbed Jose. She was angry. She was excited. But she had decided. She was done with it. The crux of this matter is that the defendant did not honestly and reasonably believe that it was necessary to kill Jose for her to survive. You saw the photo of her in South Carolina where she was messing around with her nephew and brother-in-law. William and Billy might have been fooling around with that automatic weapon, but she was deadly serious. When she got home, she didn't even change clothes before luring Jose into the Jeep by an invitation to go to the dollar store for his last ride. She's all about control, power, and manipulation. She is all about herself. She had a gun and a knife and courage. And as she texted her friend afterwards, she's tough. She's from New York. When Jose got in that Jeep, he had nothing but trust. And trust loses against a gun and a knife every time. She had no intention that Jose was going to leave that Jeep alive. Oh yes, she told everybody that would listen that she just wanted a divorce because of all of Jose's lies. But if that were true, she had no use for a gun and a knife. She didn't have to go down a dead-end road. She didn't have to leave him with no ID. She wants you to think that she packed up his suitcase to drop him at his sponsors, but there was no suitcase found, just Jose's life bagged up in garbage bags and stuffed in the trash along with her wedding rings. No suitcase, not in the Jeep, not in the garage, not in the house, not by the side of the road where she left his body. You might have found it interesting on the maps that the defendant showed to you to prove that she was going to the VA. She says she's not grasping. She didn't care about any money or getting anything from Jose. Look at how she labeled her house. She could have put 12412 Schoolhouse Road, but what does it say? It's Madonna's house. Not the family home, not the Perez Madonna home, not the Perez home, not our house. It's Madonna's home.
Objection, that's not an objection, that's something that I created.
No, for the record, it's on the exhibit. You may continue.
She wants you to buy her story that Jose was drinking and angry, but the medical examiner told you there was no alcohol in his system. And you know from the other evidence that he was 100% all AA. He'd not had a drink for over half his life. And she wants you to think that she was so flustered, upset, dazed, blacked out by what she'd done that she didn't know what she did or said. Of course, she admits now that it was all lies. Odd, isn't it? That not knowing what she was saying, it all turned out to be untruths. But that story that she told isn't true either, because what she did immediately after she murdered Jose was cover her tracks, or try to get rid of everything connected to Jose that she could not use. She acted despicably, but she acted rationally. She got up with her daughter Michelle to come home and help clean up all the blood. She asked Michelle to stop on the way and get new seat covers to cover up or be able to change out the bloody ones from Jose being strapped into the seat and bleeding profusely from his neck. She texted her friends to tell them Jose left town. She texted her Vanessa, Jose's daughter, on Jose's phone as if she was Jose, to head her off at the pass with any questions she might have had about where Jose was. How deceptive. How devastating that she would do that to that woman. She told her daughter Rachel she had nothing to fear from Jose, that he wasn't coming back. She told Chad and Chuck variations on the Gone to Florida story. She bagged up Jose's jewelry, his credit cards, his VA cards, his medications, along with all the bloody clothes and cloths. There was never any belief that he was going to get back and get to those things, that he was alive. There was never any intent that those necessary personal items would end up back in the hands of Jose. Those were not nice things to do, but they were deliberate. They were actions she chose to try to save herself. She knew exactly what she wanted to do, but she wasn't as smart as she thought she was. Sunday morning, as she sat at her computer and discovered that the dumps in Raleigh and Durham were closed, she sat at her computer and looked for the nearest Goodwill that was open so she could drop off the offending clothes of Jose, get them out of her closet, out of her house. She threw his AA coins away because she was still angry. She was trying to cover her rear. She still thought she'd be okay. She didn't count on Thomas Newman and his heart surgery that made him get up at the crack of dawn on Sunday to walk his dog. She didn't count on there not being Sunday dump hours. She didn't count on the police being able to identify Jose by his fingerprints and trace him back to her. She wasn't as smart as she thought she was, but she was deliberate, just like when she stabbed the unarmed man to death. She claimed to you that Jose attacked her, but she was the one with the weapons. Her story that she left them on the back seat, implying that Jose took them before he knew that her intent was just to ask him for a divorce, is absurd. If her worry up until that point had always been that Jose would commit suicide, if that's what was stopping her from getting a divorce, why in God's earth would she put a loaded gun and a stiletto knife on the back seat out in plain view where Jose would get into the car and might have access to it? That didn't happen. Every time she realizes a piece of her story doesn't make sense, she morphs it into a different story. Like the fact that she told her first attorney that the gun was left at the site where Jose was found. When she realized that wouldn't work, she came up with the laughable story about the altercation in some church parking lot on her map noted as possible first event, where she now says the gun was left. She had to change that first bogus story because it was clear Jose didn't dispose of that gun. And she was the only other person there. So she had to go back and do some after-the-fact magic, and voila, the gun was left in some church parking lot, and she didn't know where it was, and she wasn't sure where she had been driving around. Ladies and gentlemen, that gun was disappeared by this defendant because she used it. Why get rid of it if it was Jose that used it? And unlike the knife, it was traceable. And so it was never going to be found. She still had the box because she probably thought she could go out and, if she got away with this all, buy a replacement and stick it in that box and take it back down to South Carolina and hope that nobody would check the serial number on it. She thought she'd outsmarted the police and she'd gotten away with murder. Because Jose went to Florida, she was sticking with that. There were no other weapons than the ones that she had, or they would have been in the woods near Jose, and you know they weren't because the police searched the day that Jose was found and again the next day after the defendant told her lie about the gun being there to her lawyer, who passed it on to the police. The police were out there with dogs on both sides of the road, metal detectors, and zillions of police officers looking for anything, and they found a knife, 2 shoes, and a body. The defendant told you she had to stab Jose to death because of his vicious attack on her, but you saw all 56 photographs that were taken of this defendant by Catherine Lauder. She had no stab wounds. She had no strangulation marks. She had no bruises on her chest or her neck from Jose suffocating her. She had no gunshot wounds, no broken bones, no black eyes, no bruises on her face. All that life and death struggle, according to her, on her part, and all she ended up with was a minuscule cut on one finger and some scratches on her left arm and chest that the ME said could have been self-inflicted. But even if it was Jose that scratched her, he certainly was fighting her for his life. Those scratches looked like something a cat would have done, not a stiletto-wielding madman. Compare that to Jose. You cringed when you looked at those pictures because you're decent and normal people. The defendant didn't cringe out on the scene when she saw her handiwork and went home to finish up. She's 5'10" and 170, Jose 5'9" and 190, not so different in size and weight. She was 40-something, he's 60-something. She does all kinds of physical activities. Jose has no feeling in his legs from the knees down, no feeling in his arms from the elbows down. He has only part of a lung because of his earlier lung cancer. He has chronic bronchitis. His thumbs are basically dead. He has carpal tunnel syndrome in both hands and has practically no pincer movement left and very little strength. He can't operate a screwdriver. He's not by any means incapable of doing anything, but he struggles to do what he does. And if you looked at that photograph of him standing out in the yard and you looked at both of his hands, you saw exactly what Dr. Falge said, that his hand was clawed. That's how he was holding it. Obviously, his small motor skills are not good. He was waiting for the VA to install ramps at the back and front of his house so he could get in more safely. He uses good grips type utensils to eat because he has a hard time managing a normal knife, spoon, and fork to feed himself. This is the man she claims nearly killed her. If her story is that Jose got out of the Jeep and shot her, how did he get shot in the back of the neck? A wound that went from left to right, just like it would if he were sitting locked into his seat with his seatbelt and she were in the driver's seat and shot at him. If Jose attacked her, how did he get stabbed in the back? If Jose attacked her, why was his shirt pulled over his head? If Jose attacked her by punching her in the chest so she got knocked to the ground, where were the grass stains on her clothes? Where was the dirt? Where were the scuff marks from gravel? Where are the scrapes she must have gotten if her story were true and she had to scoot herself out from under Jose? You saw the photographs of her clothing. There was nothing there. You saw the back of her. There was nothing there. If her story is to be believed, Jose, already badly wounded in the face and spewing blood down his front, was hovering over her less than an arm's length away with his arm bent across her chest, holding her to the ground. She in her black t-shirt and capri jeans that she'd worn to South Carolina, and she had practically no blood on that shirt. You saw what Jose's shirt looked like at the scene. Absolutely red all the way down in the front. How can you believe her fiction? Her own daughter, she wants you to believe that apparently gravity doesn't work for her. Even her own daughter, Rachel, unwittingly did this defendant in. Shows you that she planned ahead to do what she did. Rachel loves her mother and doesn't want to see her go to prison, but she told you something that was very important, something the defendant didn't think about ahead of time and what it meant. Rachel told you that when the defendant came back from her ride with Jose alone, and she walked through that door from the garage into the kitchen where Rachel already was, that this defendant was wearing a brown tank top and shorts. You know the defendant went out with a black t-shirt and capri jeans. So what that tells you is that this defendant left with Jose with the intent to kill him and even took a change of clothes with her so that when she got home, her daughters and father and anyone else who might have been in that house wouldn't see any blood. And that is premeditation. The defendant spent the better part of the day telling you her tale of woe, her autobiography, but there is no evidence to back up any of what she told you, just her self-serving myth. And even if only half of it is true, though she certainly has had a lifetime to acquire some street smarts, to learn how to handle herself, to know how to get by. She thinks she can work a room and milk you for sympathy, but each time she opened her mouth, she dug herself in deeper. She's not as smart as she thinks she is, and she is certainly not as smart as you good people. She's twice before divorced. It isn't that difficult. She's had practice. She knows about LegalZoom and forms online. She worked for an attorney. I'd put money on it that he would have done a divorce for her if that was what she wanted, for little or nothing. But that wasn't what she wanted. She wanted Jose gone permanently. She never called 911. She never stopped for help. She did what she could to obliterate Jose. She turned her fairy tale into a book that she's trying to peddle to make money from her evil behavior, and she's trying to make herself into a hero to herself, her friends, her daughters, and to you. She can't face up to what she's done, and that is that she has failed again. Jose Perez was the ultimate victim of domestic violence in this case, at the very capable hands of this defendant. She sat in the witness chair and tried to charm you and feed you the same Kool-Aid she fed everyone before and after she murdered Jose, but she did not kill Jose to defend herself. She acted out of spite and anger because she was done with Jose, because she was ready to move on. No more easy money. The moment Jose got into that Jeep, he was a dead man, and that's first-degree murder. The judge will tell you to weigh all of the evidence, and that you have to assess the credibility of witnesses, that is, their believability. You have to consider any interest or bias that they might have. You have to consider whether the testimony of a witness is consistent with other believable evidence, whether a witness has an interest in the outcome of the trial, and whether the witness has made inconsistent statements. The state contends that you have heard from 3 people with an interest in shading their testimony in this case. Chad, to minimize his relationship with the defendant to try to keep his license, Rachel, to help her mother stay out of prison, and the defendant, to save her skin. No one else had anything to gain or lose. Vanessa's dad will still be dead no matter what your decision is. David Whitcomb will have lost 2 friends, Jose and the defendant. The ME has no dog in this fight. The SBI is only interested in the science. The officers get paid whether you say guilty or not guilty. But this defendant, she's the one with the biggest interest. She does not want to go to prison, and so she will tell whatever story she can to try to excuse her behavior. She made a bad marriage for herself, not because she's a good and caring person, but because she thought it was easy money. Now, Jose was not by any means a perfect person. He had issues, she had issues. He clearly wasn't truthful to the defendant, and he did not manage money well, but he was kind, forgiving, sober, loving to his own children, his grandchildren, and to the defendant's children and father, and to the defendant. He was never an assistant DA. He didn't own a farm in Puerto Rico. He wasn't dying of cancer when he moved in with the defendant, and he didn't have a trust fund. But those things are not a legal excuse for murder. Did the defendant have a right to be angry? Yes. Did she have a right to kill him? Absolutely not. She says she couldn't stand Jose because of his lies, and yet she has admitted to you that she has told lie after lie after lie to everyone around her, but she wants you to believe her now. Based on what? She said to her daughters and Chuck and Paul that she doesn't lie, cheat, or steal, and then from the stand she admits lying, she admits stealing and getting arrested for it. She admits cheating with Chad and when she was a teacher. She claimed on her first day on the stand that Jose did not abuse her, and on the second day that he held her down, pushed her, made her have sex when she didn't want it, but she didn't think it was abuse because she didn't have any bruises. So look at her resume on the bottom, second to the last line. She was a domestic violence advocate for 7 years, but she wants you to believe she didn't know. Either she has lied to you about the abuse, or she lied to whoever she gave that resume to. You have to decide, based on everything you've seen and you've heard from her and all the other witnesses. She claims she went to Chad for therapy to help her leave Jose, but she didn't tell Chad the sob story she told you about her life. Chad looked at his therapy notes as he testified to you and told you she complained of depression, a bad marriage, a controlling, lying husband, no abuse, no rapes, no PTSD, etc., 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 because she wasn't there for therapy, as quickly became abundantly clear. She saw Chad as the next installment of the Madonna show, and she set her sights on him, set her sights on getting him into her bed. She is totally self-centered and will say anything so long as it will get her what she wants. If Chad cut off the therapeutic relationship to have a carnal relationship instead, she could have sought another counselor, but she didn't. She thought she could have her cake and eat it too. She didn't want to lose the VA insurance, the educational benefits, the house, the cars, the $4,400 plus a month, plus Jose's Social Security benefits. She didn't want to admit another failure, but she also did not want Jose. And she thought she could hold on to it all if Jose disappeared, but she failed again. She did a shabby job of it, just like she's done with every other aspect of her life that she's told you about. Jose's big lie that he was dying of cancer ended up killing him. He did not die fast enough for this defendant, so she helped him along. As she posted on her Facebook on June 11th, 2013, "My tolerance for BS has run out." The defendant has put out more hogwash and called it truth than can be measured. If you were to list all the garbage she's told you, it would take 2 days. I've listed some of it for you. Some of the things that showed her state of mind. Some of the things that the defense attorney told you weren't important or irrelevant, but they tell you how her mind worked. The lies that she told that I've listed here. They just touch the surface. Some of the most offensive ones are the lies she told to that dying 17-year-old boy in South Carolina to manipulate him to give her the gun and the knife. Think how he felt the next day when he discovered that he had supplied the instrument of death. Think how his parents felt that they'd let her into the house. She is very cold and calculating. She told you about quitting her teaching job in 2013 when there were clearly already financial problems because she needed to spend time with Isabel, who was acting up. And then she turns her head and talks out of the other side of her mouth and tells you she picked up a bunch of part-time jobs and she kept shopping and meeting and doing all her activities, and she'd dump Isabel at one of those places that charges $8 an hour. What kind of caring, selfless mother is that? Isabel, who got no therapy while living with the defendant, but does now living with Chuck. Isabel, who was cared for by Jose, transported by Jose, played with by Jose. If she loved her daughter Rachel so dearly, why on earth would she help her connect with the man who raped her, as she admits she did? Think about what she told you about Jose arguing with her about which hospital he wanted to go to. Do you honestly buy that a man whose face was slashed open, his dentures broken in his mouth, whose tongue was cut, who was bleeding profusely down the front of his shirt, and had also been stabbed in the arm, was going to argue about where to seek emergency help? Think about what she said about pulling off onto Old Bayleaf. She said Jose was already wounded. He'd already fooled her once with a fake heart attack, and she falls for that again. And if he was so badly injured already, why did she pull down the road 200 yards or more, almost to the dead end, instead of stopping at the Newman's house, which was right on the corner of 98 and Old Bayleaf? Or one of the businesses not far from where she turned off, as she said existed. Use your reason and common sense. What this defendant did to Jose on Old Bayleaf Road was unspeakable, and what she has done here in court is equally unspeakable. Contrary to what her lawyer told you in her opening statement, the gunshot residue test doesn't prove the defendant's story. It is more consistent with Jose having tried to ward off a shot while in the confined space of the Jeep than him having ever touched that gun. No gunshot residue on the back of his hand. You hold the gun like this, the cloud of stuff comes out of the gun. You'd expect it to be on the back of your hand, not the palm of your right hand. If he had touched the gunshot wound on his neck, or pushed his hand out to stop her from shooting him, or even touched the gun before she shot or after she shot, That's consistent with him having gunshot residue on the palm of his left hand, the one closest to her. It would have been nice if Sharon Hinton had been able to testify that the blood all over the place was Jose's, but she can't. Although she got 2 different blood samples from the medical examiner and twice tried to get a DNA profile, both times it came out as a mixture because of 2 people's DNA, and that makes sense because Jose had someone else's liver inside of his body, someone else's DNA mixing in with his, and she didn't know about the facts of this case and the circumstances of this case and all of Jose's health problems and the organ transplant, and that's as it should be because her job is the science, it's not the law enforcement. But we know whose blood was all over the car and on the road and on the clothes in the trash and on the defendant's jeans and shirt and belt because there were only 2 people in that Jeep that night on Old Bayleaf Road when Jose got hacked to death. And one thing Sharon Hinton could tell you is that none of that blood belonged to the defendant. She claims to be a good person who doesn't lie, steal, or cheat, but actions speak louder than words. She was untruthful to all the people who loved and trusted her. She lied to the state of New York when she reported Rachel's father as John Lopez rather than the man from St. Vincent. She lied to her church when she put it on Rachel's baptismal certificate. She was untruthful to the clergy that she wrote to and confessed to. She has been untruthful to you. She may deceive herself, but she cannot deceive you, 12 honest, decent, commonsensical people. You people are the conscience of this community. You're the law of North Carolina, not the police, not me, not the judge. You, as jurors, determine what we as a society will tolerate. Jose never hurt this defendant, her children, her father. He took them in, made a place for them in his house and in his heart. He did their laundry, took care of the house with the help of friends. He cooked for them. He ran errands. He took the defendant's father to his doctor's appointments, took Isabel to school, to the mall for ice cream, and to her father. He helped Rachel with her car problems and paid for her car. He even put up with Michelle's rudeness and flaunting of the rule violations in the house and having a friend move in. Jose and the defendant were both deeply flawed people, but that is no excuse for this defendant to have brutally murdered Jose. She claims self-defense, but look at her activities, her behavior, her statements. She is all about power, control, manipulation. She always has to be right. She claims she puts her girls above everything, but she is a narcissist by her choices, her life, not her phony story that she tried to tell you here in court. She puts herself first. Your job isn't to decide this case based on sympathy, bias, or prejudice, and it wouldn't be hard to have sympathy for the defendant's daughters or for Jose's daughter and grandchildren, but your job is to determine from the evidence that's been presented, the evidence, what you believe the facts to be and apply them to the law. We told you from the beginning that this trial wasn't going to be like those cop and lawyer shows that you see on TV, that it wouldn't all wrap up with every question answered in 45 minutes with commercials, and as you've seen, it's not. Sometimes it seems tedious, and I'm sure that from your questions that you were impatient for information, for answers. But we have rules that we have to go by, and all the answers don't come from one person or 2 witnesses. In fact, in real life, you hardly ever get all the answers that you'd like to have. But what you do get in a court of law is you get the picture. A trial unfolds often more slowly than you'd like, each witness adding a piece to a complex jigsaw puzzle of an event. Some show science, others show circumstances from which you can infer the defendant's state of mind. Some explain history, some opinion, but over the course of this trial, you have heard all of the admissible evidence, and now you must draw the line in the sand. The state can't possibly go over every single piece of evidence that you've heard, every single untruth that this defendant has told. Nor what all of those pieces that she has told you or things she has told you mean. But the state can point out and guide you in your deliberations. The state can't answer every single question that might occur to you, but if you think critically and carefully about what you have seen and what you have heard, you can answer those questions beyond a reasonable doubt. There is no reasonable doubt that this defendant murdered Jose Perez, she is not entitled by her behavior to self-defense. And here's the last thing I want you to think about. The defendant's story is that she stabbed Jose multiple times while on her back, and you got that lovely demonstration from Mr. Thomas and the dummy. The testimony is from her that she was on her back with him on top of her, with his arm bent across her chest or her neck. She claimed he had leaned on her so hard that she was losing consciousness. She told you she picked up the knife with her left hand and stabbed until she could get out from under him. You think about where all those stab wounds were, especially the one down here. She couldn't lift her body up to get to that. How did it get stabbed there? She stabbed, as she said, after picking up the knife with her left hand, and stabbed until she could get out from under Jose. Jose would then have been down on the ground, carotid artery, heart, jaw, arm, hands, lung, stabbed and bleeding out into the grass. And the defendant thought, per her story, that he'd try to get up and run after her. And here's where those 5 stab wounds in the back come in. All the blood up until then is on his face, neck, front of his shirt, and his pants. You saw the photograph of the nearly bloodless shirt back that had been pulled up over his head. There wasn't any blood running down his back from those wounds. This tells you about the defendant's intent, about her malice, her deliberation, and her plan. Because once she was free and clear, once Jose had already fatally been wounded, she got out from under him, according to her story, if that happened, and she took that knife, and the only way those wounds on the back of his body got there was that she rammed it into his body 5 more times, just to be sure. That's intentional. That's with malice. That's with premeditation and deliberation, and nothing less. We ask you to find her guilty of first-degree murder.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take an early luncheon recess. And I'll come back and charge you after our lunch. During our luncheon recess period, it is your duty not to talk among yourselves about this case. It's your duty not to talk to the parties, the witnesses, or the lawyers about anything. Further duty not to talk to anyone else, to allow anyone else to talk with you or to say anything in your presence about this case. If anyone provides any information to you that you hear, see, about this case, you need to let the sheriff know about it immediately. Don't do any independent research or investigation on your own about any issue touching on this trial. Stay away from your smartphones. It has to do anything with this case. Avoid reading, watching, listening to accounts. And you haven't heard me. You haven't had any time to deliberate. So do not form or express an opinion about this case during this time. That while everyone else can remain seated, I'm going to excuse the 13 of you and ask that you return and assemble in the jury room at 1:15 this afternoon. Again, we go by that clock. That's your excuse. Reflect that the jury is absent from the courtroom. Anything the record state?
No, Your Honor.
Anything to the record for the defendant?
Your Honor, just briefly for the record, I'd like to restate my objection. I know during the case in chief there came evidence through Ms. Shandles about Ms. Madonna's abortion, and then furthermore, when we get into her closing arguments about Ms. Madonna's quote-unquote inability to keep her knees closed, I think that's a wholly inappropriate argument to the jury. It's beyond the pale. I think it violates Ms. Madonna's due process rights, and I think the only proper remedy for that is a mistrial, and we would make that request at this point in time.
Noted for the record, denied.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything further for the defendant?
No, Your Honor.
Court being recessed to 1:15.
Supreme Court says recess 1:15.